It doesn't announce itself loudly. There's no dramatic rejection, no obvious exclusion, no moment where someone tells you that you don't belong. Instead, it shows up as a subtle awareness that you're present, but not fully inside the moment. You're standing in the room, listening to the conversation, responding when it's your turn. You're smiling, you're nodding, you're doing everything that looks right from the outside. And yet, something inside you stays half a step back. It feels like you're observing the interaction while also participating in it. Like part of your attention is always turned inward, monitoring how you're coming across, adjusting your tone, recalibrating your timing. You notice that others seem to relax into the moment in a way you don't. They lean back. They speak freely. They interrupt without apologizing. They take up space without thinking about it. You, on the other hand, feel yourself waiting, measuring, choosing words carefully. Not because you're afraid of people, but because you're aware of them. Afterward, when the interaction ends, there's often a strange emotional residue. Not embarrassment, not regret, just a sense of quiet dissonance. You replay moments that didn't feel wrong, but didn't feel right either. Why did that feel effortful? Why do I feel drained even though nothing happened? Why do I feel different here even when I'm accepted? This is one of the most misunderstood social experiences, because from the outside, people who feel socially misplaced often look composed, thoughtful, even socially skilled. But internally, their body never fully settles. In psychology, this experience is often tied to low social attunement alignment, not a lack of skill, but a mismatch between internal rhythms and external environments. Your system doesn't fully sync with the space, so it stays alert, and alertness over time becomes exhausting. Many people misinterpret this feeling as shyness or introversion, but that explanation doesn't fully capture it, because the feeling doesn't disappear just because you're with familiar people, and it doesn't disappear just because you're liked. It disappears only in certain contexts, with certain people, in moments where you don't feel the need to edit yourself, which tells us something important. The problem isn't social ability, it's social fit. For most people who feel misplaced socially, this pattern didn't begin with adulthood. It began much earlier, in environments where emotional cues were inconsistent, unpredictable, or required interpretation. You may have grown up in spaces where moods shifted without explanation, humor was welcome one moment and criticized the next. Emotional expression needed to be carefully timed. So instead of expressing freely, you learned to read first. In psychology, this adaptation is often described as social vigilance, a heightened sensitivity to interpersonal cues developed as a protective strategy. Your system learned that blending in wasn't automatic. It had to be managed. You watched reactions closely. You adjusted yourself mid-sentence. You learned when to speak and when to hold back. At first, this skill helped you. It kept you safe. It prevented missteps. It allowed you to stay connected in environments where emotional misalignment had consequences. But over time, the skill became a stance. You stopped entering rooms as yourself and started entering them as a version of yourself. Another layer that deepens this experience is identity diffusion. When you spend too much time adapting to others, your own internal reference point weakens. You begin to feel unsure, not because you lack personality, but because you've learned to prioritize context over authenticity. So in social settings, your mind doesn't ask, "What do I want to say?" It asks, "What will land here?" That question creates distance, because connection requires presence, and presence requires a sense of self that doesn't need permission. This is why many people who feel socially misplaced feel more comfortable in one-on-one conversations, quieter environments, slower interactions, or spaces where depth is valued over performance. Their system relaxes when it doesn't have to compress itself. What often gets overlooked is that feeling misplaced isn't always about being too different. Sometimes it's about being too self-aware in environments that reward ease over reflection. Your awareness becomes a liability in settings built for spontaneity. And instead of recognizing the mismatch, the mind turns inward. Why can everyone else do this so easily? Why do I feel like I'm always a step behind? Feeling socially misplaced is uncomfortable, but it's not random. It often appears during periods of internal transition, times when your values are changing faster than your environment. times when your tolerance for superficial connection is shrinking, times when you're becoming more discerning about where you give your energy. In psychology, this stage is often linked to identity differentiation, the process of separating who you are from who you learn to be in order to belong. During differentiation, old environments can start to feel foreign. Conversations that once felt fine now feel empty. Group dynamics that once felt safe now feel constricting. Social roles that once gave you belonging now feel limiting. This doesn't mean you're becoming antisocial. It means you're becoming selective. And selectivity often feels like isolation before it feels like clarity. Many people respond to this phase by forcing themselves to be more social. They attend more gatherings. They push themselves to engage. They override their discomfort. But the discomfort isn't about exposure. It's about alignment. You can be surrounded by people and still feel misplaced if the environment doesn't reflect who you are becoming. This is why the feeling often resolves not by changing yourself, but by changing context. When you find spaces where silence isn't awkward, depth isn't disruptive, presence doesn't require performance, your system relaxes. You stop monitoring yourself. You stop rehearsing responses. You stop feeling like you're slightly outside the moment. And something important shifts. You realize that ease is not proof of worth, and effort is not proof of failure. Some environments require you to disappear to belong. Others allow you to arrive whole. Feeling misplaced doesn't mean you're socially broken. It often means you're socially discerning and still learning where you fit without shrinking. And once you understand that, the feeling stops being a flaw. It becomes a compass.